David Sterling's initial approach to the Anchor project was one of journalistic skepticism, not existential dread. His task, assigned during the languid summer months at the City Tribune, was to analyze why Mayor Abebi's signature development, a multi-billion-dollar transformation of the derelict docks into a promised hub of sustainable technology and public parks, was 2 years behind schedule and running $500 billion over its initial, already ambitious budget. Sterling, a veteran reporter whose byline carried the weight of 2 decades, assumed the usual culprits: poor contracting, inevitable bureaucratic friction, or perhaps at worst, the kind of low-grade cronyism that simply inflated a few pockets without sinking the whole ship. He was prepared to write a long, dry feature about municipal failure, lamenting the disconnect between progressive political vision and administrative reality. His initial findings pointed to boilerplate issues, unforeseen soil remediation costs, late-stage design changes, and a convoluted permitting process that seemed designed to frustrate progress. The draft he submitted reflected this clinical detachment, a detailed but emotionless accounting of bureaucratic inefficiencies. The story changed when Eleanor Vance, the managing editor, circled a line item with a harsh, crimson question mark, $45 million allocated to construction management fees paid to Veridian Holdings. Eleanor's sharp, gravelly voice cut through Sterling's easy assumptions, forcing him to confront the absurdity of the number. Veridian Holdings. The name was utterly unfamiliar, a digital phantom in the competitive world of urban development. For a project of this scale and complexity, a $45 million fee for management, paid in an accelerated tranche early in the project lifecycle, was not merely high, it was an audacious act of financial misrepresentation. The moment Sterling began the deeper dive into Veridian, his perspective shifted irrevocably. This was no longer a story of incompetence, but of sophisticated, brazen theft. Veridian Holdings had materialized seemingly from thin air. Its corporate footprint was laughably small: a virtual office P.O. box downtown, a boilerplate website with stock photos and vague mission statements about integrated urban renewal, and a track record that was non-existent prior to securing the mammoth Anchor project contract. The initial procurement records proved to be a masterwork of bureaucratic manipulation. 3 highly qualified, established national construction management firms had been mysteriously disqualified during the final round of bidding on minor technical paperwork errors. Veridian, the least experienced and most opaque contender, was left as the default victor. This was the classic signal of a fixed contract, a process meticulously crafted not to select the best company, but to justify the selection of the chosen company. Sterling felt the familiar cold fire of a major investigation ignite in his stomach. The paper maze had been built specifically to hide a face, and that face belonged to someone at the pinnacle of city power. The hunt led Sterling through layers of corporate obfuscation. Veridian Holdings was a paper doll, owned by Anchor Management Group, which in turn reported to Coral Reef Ventures, a registered entity in a state known for its lax disclosure laws. The trail eventually evaporated into the anonymity of an offshore structure, the Arbutus Trust. This deliberately confusing labyrinth of ownership, multiple jurisdictions, and nested holding companies served no business purpose, only one of concealment. Sterling knew the structure was perfect, except for one inevitable flaw: someone, somewhere, had to sign the paper. He began pulling records of all individuals who had interacted with the Anchor project from the mayor's office outward, a tedious manual cross-referencing process that yielded only more names and titles. No confession. The breakthrough, the essential human link, came through an old contact who mentioned the abrupt, unexplained departure of Alara Chen, a city council aide who had worked directly on the appropriations for the Anchor project. The official reason, burnout, sounded too clean, too convenient. Sterling tracked Chen down to a quiet non-profit far from the political glare of City Hall. He met her not as an aggressive journalist, but as an observer of shared fear. He laid out the facts he already possessed: the $45 million fee, the shell companies, and the certainty that the money was stolen. He left his card, asking her only to think about the people of the city whose taxes funded the embezzlement. The waiting was the hardest part, a tension that stretched over 2 days until late one night. His untraceable burner phone buzzed, Alara Chen, when they finally met in the anonymity of a public library parking lot, was a ghost of her former self, a figure hollowed out by fear and moral exhaustion. She confirmed Sterling's worst suspicions, delivering the name that would detonate the investigation: Marcus Dunn. Dunn was the mayor's political strategist. Her most trusted advisor, a man whose history with Mayor Abebi predated her political career. Chen revealed that Dunn was the silent architect, the individual who had executed the sophisticated financial structure. She had stumbled across the fraud when handling the capital disbursements, noticing massive, immediate wire transfers moving from Veridian straight into foreign accounts, bypassing any actual operational use of the funds. When she questioned the city CFO, she was met with a blunt threat and shown the final link in the chain, a private memo, personally signed by Mayor Abebi, authorizing the accelerated, full disbursement of funds to Veridian, overriding standard procedural safeguards. Chen did not have the memo, but she did provide the key to unlocking the offshore maze, the registration details of the Arbutus Trust, which showed that Marcus Dunn was the sole signatory and executor. The beneficiaries were cleverly shielded, but the mechanism for the payoff was established. The revelation was stark. The mayor provided the authority, Dunn provided the mechanism, and the stolen funds flowed out. The immense task now was to move beyond circumstantial evidence and acquire irrefutable financial proof that tied the embezzled city money directly back to the mayor. Sterling enlisted Javier, a trusted forensic data analyst, to follow the scent of the $45 million. Their temporary safe-house office became a bunker dedicated to untangling Dunn's digital paper trail. Javier confirmed the layering. The money flowed from the city treasury to Veridian, then fractured into 3 international conduits. The most significant portion, nearly 70%, landed at Port Royal Private Holdings, a small, highly discreet bank in the Cayman Islands. This single destination confirmed the intent to hide, launder, and protect the political spoils. Sterling leveraged every contact he had, utilizing international business registry searches and a network of financial watchdog informants, eventually securing the critical client information sheet for the Cayman receiving account. The account was titled the Phoenix Fund, Ltd., and the sole signatory listed on the document was Marcus Dunn. The physical proof was chillingly neat. The $45 million had moved from the city, through Dunn's front company, Veridian, into his personal offshore vehicle, the Phoenix Fund. Yet the narrative remained politically vulnerable. The mayor could still claim she was duped, that Dunn had abused her trust. Sterling needed the transfer to connect Dunn to Abebi. The answer lay in the timing and the error. Javier noticed an immaculate pattern. Every major deposit into the Phoenix Fund occurred within 72 hours of an expedited disbursement approval from the mayor's office. It was the calculated rhythm of a criminal enterprise. Then came the operational slip. Javier cross-referenced the fund's withdrawal history with Mayor Abebi's public travel logs. 3 days after a large city disbursement was finalized, the Phoenix Fund wired a substantial $2 million withdrawal to a private real estate holding company in Seattle. Mayor Abebi was publicly documented speaking at a major trade conference in Seattle that week. The final piece of the financial map came when Sterling pulled the corporate registration for the Seattle entity, Emerald Crest Properties. The principal was listed as the mayor's sister, a woman with no substantial financial background, who had used the wired money to purchase a high-end condominium. The purchase provided the irrefutable motive and the direct non-political link. The money, stolen by Abebi's authority and laundered by Dunn, was funding the mayor's family's illegal enrichment. With the financial network fully mapped and confirmed, Sterling focused on the final definitive piece of evidence, the missing mayoral authorization memo Alara Chen had described. He reasoned that a bank, operating under federal regulatory standards, would maintain an original copy of the document authorizing a $45 million transfer. He targeted Coastal Union Bank, the city's primary banking partner. His method was subtle, scheduling a feigned interview with the bank's head of commercial accounts to discuss public-private transparency. During the interview, he casually introduced a false premise, stating that he understood the mayor's authorization was a simple letter. The bank executive, eager to assert the institution's stringent security, boasted about their protocol. The transaction required a specific, proprietary document, a green carbon copy triplicate bearing the mayor's personal, notarized signature retained for a full 5 years. Armed with this specific proprietary detail, the color, the notary's name, and the retention policy, Sterling contacted a trusted pro bono civil liberties attorney. They drafted a highly specific but technically legal subpoena, narrowly focused on obtaining the mayoral disbursement authorization form, green copy, tied to the Veridian Holdings contract, framed as a public records request under an obscure bond transparency statute. The request was so precise and limited that the bank, viewing it as a minor, unavoidable compliance issue, provided the document without fighting it. The original green form, notarized and stamped, arrived by secure courier to the Tribune offices late on a Friday afternoon. Sterling carefully unfolded the heavy paper. The language was written in Mayor Abebi's distinctive formal style, citing an immediate and critical operational need to expedite the entire $45 million payment to Veridian. And there on the final signature line, bold and undeniable, was the elegant, recognizable script. Abebi. The date confirmed it was the signature that triggered the immediate flow of public money into Dunn's offshore account. It was the smoking gun, the final absolute proof that the city's political hero was a sophisticated felon. The investigative phase was now complete. The publication phase, and the ensuing political detonation, was imminent. The final draft, now a comprehensive report detailing every wire transfer, every shell corporation, and every deceitful signature, was handed to Eleanor Vance. She absorbed the documents with grim silence, recognizing that the paper held the key not only to a criminal investigation, but to the complete destruction of the city's political foundation. The internal debate was intense, centered on the inevitable political counterattack. The mayor's team would cry political conspiracy, attempting to frame the Tribune as a racially motivated attack on a successful minority leader. The legal team warned that the defamation claim would be swift and vicious. Sterling stood firm, arguing that the $350 million stolen, regardless of the mayor's political symbolism, demanded the truth. The decision was sealed. The story would run as the banner headline, a full-page indictment. The final political resistance came in the form of a direct threat. An hour before the presses were scheduled to roll, Sterling received a call from Marcus Dunn. The strategist's voice, utterly composed, offered a lucrative career change, a smooth landing into a high six-figure communications role, if Sterling would simply bury the story. Dunn's final appeal was to political pragmatism. The city would fail, the opposition would destroy everything Mayor Abebi had started, and the greater good required the compromise. Sterling refused, hanging up the phone with a sense of immense, painful finality. He had chosen the difficult, lonely path of truth over political comfort and gain. The publication of The Anchor Project, A Foundation of Fraud, was a seismic event. The sheer volume of verifiable cold documentation, the account details, the notarized signatures, the precise property deeds, overwhelmed the mayor's initial public relations counteroffensive. The political storm was immediate. Talk radio and social media were awash with accusations of conspiracy, but the facts were too numerous, too specific, to dismiss as mere innuendo. Within hours, the state attorney general, already alerted by Sterling's anonymous tip, announced a formal criminal probe into Veridian Holdings and the city's contracting practices. Federal agencies quickly followed, focusing on the international money laundering associated with the Arbutus Trust and the Phoenix Fund. Mayor Abebi's subsequent press conference was a masterclass in political defiance, a performance of righteous indignation. She dismissed the Tribune's report as malicious fabrication, denying all knowledge of the alleged fraud and painting herself as the victim of a calculated smear campaign engineered by her political rivals. She reaffirmed her unwavering faith in Marcus Dunn, calling him an unjustly persecuted public servant. But her carefully constructed defense crumbled later that day when Alara Chen, now under state protection, went public. Chen's simple, honest testimony, her recounting of the memo, the threats, and the precise timeline of the fraudulent transfers provided the human confirmation that shattered the mayor's image of persecuted innocence. The evidence was now insurmountable. The political fallout became an immediate, unstoppable avalanche. Within days, Marcus Dunn fled the jurisdiction, only to be apprehended in the Caribbean under an international warrant for wire fraud and money laundering. As he was extradited, the mayor's cabinet began to dissolve, key members issuing terse, carefully worded resignation statements citing the need for civic focus. Facing inevitable impeachment and prosecution based on Dunn's imminent cooperation, Mayor Abebi quietly announced her immediate resignation, citing vague health concerns and the desire to focus on her family, maintaining a final, desperate insistence that she would eventually be cleared. It was the quiet, sterile death of a political star, confirming the true, ugly nature of her administration. 6 months later, the dust settled into a layer of corrosive cynicism. David Sterling, now a national figure and a strong candidate for a Pulitzer, felt the crushing weight of the story's aftermath. The Anchor Project remained a massive, half-excavated hole in the ground, a visible monument to the city's betrayal. It was no longer a symbol of hope, but a harsh reminder of how easily faith could be weaponized and stolen. The success of the investigation, the preservation of journalistic integrity, had come at the cost of the public's belief in its own institutions. Sterling understood that his job was not to be a hero, but a necessary destroyer of lies. He knew the cynicism would make his next investigation harder, more fraught with public suspicion. But as he sat at his desk, staring out at the city that had once adored its former mayor, he knew the work wasn't finished. The focus now shifted from the docklands to the less visible theft, the city's massive, vulnerable pension fund. The truth had been revealed, but the vigilance, he understood, was perpetual.